Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Kingdom Builder TV. I'm your host, Kelly Meade, and I'm so glad to have our guest joining us today. Her music and testimony has touched the lives of many as she has shared the stage with several Southern gospel greats, including the Booth Brothers, Triumphant Quartet, and the Gaither Vocal Band, just to name a few. Sherry Ann, how are you?
I'm good, Kelly. It's so good to see you again on the screen here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on the show. I know we've been trying for a while to have you on, so I'm glad it finally worked out.
Me too. Thank you.
So we first met when you opened for Jason Crabb in Horseheads, New York, back in 2018.
That's
And
right.
it's been so nice having the opportunity to see you several times since then and get to know you through the years.
Yeah, it's been well, my goodness, it's coming up on 4 or 5 years now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 5 years in July, I believe. So it's crazy to think of how fast that went by.
I know.
I remember the first time I heard your testimony, and it's always so inspiring and powerful each time you share it. For our viewers who may not be familiar with you and your music, can you share a little bit of your story with us?
Yes, and thank you, Kelly, for that introduction. And thank you for coming to the concert where I've had a chance to get to know you and your mom and get to know you guys a little bit better. It's been a blessing. And I appreciate what you said about the testimony. I have shared it, yes, all across the country, but I do know that not everybody is aware that I was born severely hearing impaired and as a result speech impaired. And the interesting thing is not only do your viewers not know that, but my family didn't know that at the time. So I went off to school as this little 5-year-old girl, just kind of like everybody else, except for that I wasn't like everybody else because I began failing out of kindergarten very early on. I began struggling to make the grade and I was doing terrible and getting in trouble for talking and not listening and being disciplined and being bullied. And just it was a really tough time for a little 5-year-old. And thank God the school nurse conducted a physical and they found out that I was severely and profoundly hearing impaired. So my grades and my listening and all of that was a result of not being able to hear, not knowing what was going on. But because I came from a difficult home and a dysfunctional background, they thought maybe I was just a problem child at that time until they now realized I was a child with a problem. Of course, that's a very big difference. So with that, they gave me my first hearing aid. And of course, my grades instantly began to improve. And then they gave me my second hearing aid and my grades just catapulted and went right through the roof. And, it's just amazing what a child can do when, number one, they can hear. And number two, you know what they need in order to succeed. And so from there, that's exactly what happened. I went from kind of being this problem student to an extreme overachiever. And for the next 12 years of my academic career, I had achieved all kinds of awards and trophies and tiaras and accolades. I graduated early from high school. I went on to college. I got a 4-year degree paid for by scholarships. And then I went on to graduate school. And I actually became a doctor by the age of 24. But then the turn in my story is that I wanted to end it all by the age of 25. And people can't understand, how do you go from being this terrific overachiever that everybody thinks is so successful to getting to a place where you just literally want to throw the towel in and you can't take another step or face another day. And for me, it was because I had been working all those years to achieve so many things, and all of my worth and my value was caught up in, I must have straight A's, I must be a top student, I must get a trophy in this, I must get an award in that. And then when I got to graduate school and things were so hard for me and I began having hearing difficulties again because the classrooms were so large, the acoustics were not good, the professors weren't sensitive to my need because now you're a grad student. So I began to, instead of being this big fish in a little pond that I was used to being, I began to sink. I began to drown in this little pond, in this pond. And I felt like I was a tadpole in this ocean. I just felt lost. And my whole worth and identity was based on what I could do and who I was. So now that I wasn't doing well and I wasn't feeling well about who I was, I began to drown, basically. I began to sink and I just lost my worth, my identity, my value, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I remember crying out to God at the lowest point in my life and just saying, you know, God, what's the point? If you're really there, I've done all these things, I've achieved all these things, but I still don't feel loved. I still don't feel valued. I still don't feel, no matter what I achieve, no matter what I do, I just don't feel like it's ever enough. And that comes from coming from a broken home where, you know, you're told it's not enough and you have to earn the love of your parents who are fractured and broken because of what they're dealing with. So you never learn that sense of unconditional love. You never learn that sense of worth. And so you keep striving to try to get it, and you drive yourself into a nervous breakdown is what happened. And that's what happened for me. So I cried out to God and I said, you know, God, if you're really there, if you really exist, because they say God is love. Well, I don't see love because my family broke up when I was little. All the families in my family broke up, a lot of divorce throughout my whole family. So I'm like, where's the love in this world? And I certainly don't feel loved. I had a serious relationship and that broke off. So I'm like, where is this love? Where's God? Where are you? Because if you don't exist and you're not here, then I don't need to exist and I don't need to be here. Because what's the point of all this? It's just nonsense. And that's kind of like the writer of Ecclesiastes felt when he wrote Ecclesiastes. He just felt like everything was worthless and pointless. And that's how desperate I got. But thank God for God. Because in that moment, when I cried out and said, if you're really there, then I need to hear from you. This hearing impaired girl needs to hear from you. It was in that moment that I believed, well, I saw a vision, but I also heard inside of me a voice. What I saw was this vision of Christ nailed to the cross with his outstretched arms. I saw a crown on his head, dripping of blood down his face. And I just saw him lift up his face and his eyes just pointed right to me. And I heard the words, I died for you so that you could live for me. And it was in that critical moment, Kelly, that I just realized that all this time I was living for me and what I could do. And look at me, look who I am. And it wasn't enough, because in that moment, I realized that it's about who God is and what he's done for us. He says none of us will measure up. And you think, well, that's not good news. Well, it is, because he chose to pay the price for all the times you will be imperfect, for all the ways you will fall short, and all the ways you will sin, fall short of God. We all do. He tells us that we do. And when you realize that you're not perfect, you won't measure up, you won't be good enough, but God, we always have to remember, but God loves you anyway. And he paid the price for your sins. He said, you won't measure up, you'll never get it perfect, but I'll lay down my life. I'll pay the price for your sin. Because the Bible says the penalty for sin is death. And Jesus says, I will give my life. You don't give yours, I will give mine. The Bible says there has to be a perfect sacrifice. And there's only one that's perfect, and that's Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. He said, I'll pay that price for you. Why? So that you can have life and life more abundantly. It's the thief who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus comes to give us life and life more abundantly. And I didn't know that until I came to the end of myself, had done all that I could do, and it still wasn't enough. But God says, it is finished. It is enough, because I love you. I chose you. I have a plan for you. And Kelly, you have to know, obviously you do, that set my life on a total different path from that point forward. It was no longer about me and what I could do, but Lord, what would you want me to do for you? What can I do for you? How can I make a difference in this world? And that was just a total turning point in my life.
Yeah, it's amazing how God can just use our circumstances and our like human emotions and just work through all of it and eventually guide us to the path that he intended for us originally, no matter how far we deviate from it. He can still take all of that, all the broken parts, and just piece it back together into what he wants us to do, to live for him. So in that, in speaking with all of that, what initially inspired you to pursue music as a result of all of this?
Well, you just hit the nail on the head so beautifully, because all I ever wanted to do, so here you have this hearing impaired girl, and I want to sing. I came to my mom and my parents and said, I want to sing. But my mom, who's now a single mom, was kind of trying to figure out how the hearing and speech impaired girl going to be a singer. And my mom didn't know God at that time. She was very broken. You just talked about the broken pieces. And she's thinking, okay, we're in survival mode here. I've got to survive. I've got kids. I've got to get a job. You're going to need a job. You're going to need a real job that's going to support you. And so with that, my mom steered me and pushed me academically, of course. And then you heard about all that what took place there. But in the back of my mind and my heart and my desire that, it says God gives us the desires of our heart, but God put those desires there because those desires will glorify and they will lift up his name and they will serve his kingdom. And so that desire was always there to sing. I didn't know why at the time. But as my mom came to know the Lord and we got involved in church in my teenage years, I then began to sing a little bit in church. I sang in school, I sang in choir, I made all county choir, small county choir, I did all of that, had some solos, but I thought that was the end of it, even though the desire was still stirring, And then when mom came to know the Lord, we went to church, I did my first solo there, and there was a woman there who introduced me to Gaither music, which is basically at that time Southern gospel music. I didn't grow up with gospel music. I didn't grow up in a home with gospel music. I did not. I had my parents were dance teachers. I grew up with disco. I grew up with Elvis. I mean, this is what I grew up with. So that's all I knew. So to hear this Southern gospel, I knew country. And some of the country singers that I knew were on these Southern gospel videos that were presented to me. And so I saw the marriage between some gospel music and country music. And so I began to reconcile those two. And I was like, well, I like country. And this is kind of like a Southern form of country music. And I started to get into it. And then when I heard the message, it just ministered to me like nothing ever has. And I began to say to myself, this is what I want to do. I want to minister the message with music.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful thing. And it's always amazing to me how God will just use the music to speak into their lives in ways that we can't even really we can't understand fully a lot of the time, but it breaks through all the barriers that we can put up. And just, I love music. That's why it's such a big part of me too. And what you said about the marriage between country and Southern gospel, that's a lot of my background as well, because I grew up on country music.
Oh,
So yeah, Southern gospel was something that drew me a little bit more into listening to more Christian music as well, because before that it was mainly the hymns at church and that we grew up with and everything. So it was awesome to start to hear the more mainstream stuff, and it really has the power to speak to your heart in ways. And you have recorded a lot of heartfelt albums yourself, and your music videos always add a special element to the songs to help bring the stories to life. I especially love Silent Prayer and Still the God Who Parts the Sea and You're My Strength. Those are a few of my favorites. Your most recent, Believe, not only speaks into the lives of children and helps them to remember their worth in God's eyes, but also for all ages, so that we can remember that He is our Heavenly Father and we can have that connection to Him. Can you share about how this song came together?
yeah. So thank you, Kelly. Believe is so, and you mentioned Still the God Who Parts the Sea. Both of those songs are on my new album, and I wrote or co-wrote both of those songs. So that's very special for me for you to bring those up. Believe has such an interesting history. If you go back, I don't know, 15 years ago, when all these voice reality shows started coming in to play, at one time they were offering anybody watching to send in a song they submitted for the final, for the winner of this vocal show to sing at the end. And I love poetry. I've been writing poetry all my life, and I was wanting to get into songwriting, but I was not singing. I hadn't recorded any albums or anything like that. I was just singing a solo in church here and there. But I was like, oh, this contest went out to all the millions of viewers across the world. But I thought, I'll write a song. And I wanted to write a song about worth and value, because by now I'm in church, I'm doing Bible studies, I'm in women's group, and I'm understanding that, I did pageants, I did all those things that I don't agree with for me now, because it's not about outside beauty, it's about inward beauty. And I was learning that worth and value really comes from what's in your heart outward, not what you do from the outward. And so I thought, I want to write a song. Here's all these kids trying to make it. They're all struggling, and are they going to think that they have no worth if they don't win this show? I want to write a song about worth and value. And so I started to write this song, Believe. And I think originally it was called Destiny or My Destiny or something like that. And it talks about our destiny is in Christ, in God. And so I'm writing this song way back when, 2006 or 2007, something like that. And I shelved it. I don't think I ever sent it in. I don't think I had the confidence to send it in. And when I was making my third album, so I ended up putting the song on my 8th album. But when I was making my third album, I brought it to my producer and he said, yeah, you've got a good shell here. We've got to develop this idea more. And then we just did it because there's so many songs that come to the table when you're making an album. It just got pushed aside for other songs. So now I'm making my 8th album and my producer's like, what you got? I'm like, well, I got this song I've been hanging on to, value, purpose, worth. That's a lot of my message in concerts to teenagers, to young people, to adults, to seniors, to God's people. This is the message that you matter. And so let's look at this, she said. And so we looked at it and Tony Jolene Clay helped me to fully develop the song into what you see and hear now. But there's a double message behind it. As Tony put her touch on it, it developed into a song that I saw could emerge for a pro-life message. And the irony behind that, if you will, is that when my mom was pregnant with me, of course, she didn't know it was a girl at the time, but when she was pregnant with me, abortion had just become legal 1 year prior. And she was in such a tumultuous situation at that time that she didn't see a way out and she didn't want to bring another child in to that environment. So at that time, not knowing the Lord, she thought the best, most merciful thing she could do for this child was not to bring the child into this world. And so my mom scheduled that appointment. And as my mom ascended the steps to the clinic, she heard what she didn't know at the time was the voice of the Lord, but in her spirit or in her gut or in her mind, she thought it was intuition at the time. She heard something that said, don't do it. And she just said she was like a robot and she just turned around, walked down the clinic step and gave birth to me. So, and we do know Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, to give you a future, not to harm you, to prosper you, to give you a hope. And that's kind of been the motto verse for this song, Jeremiah 29:11 and Psalm 139:16. For his eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. So even when I wasn't fully formed, his eyes saw my substance. And that's the greatest message of life that we can give to people. And so I released a video for that song right in conjunction with the Sanctity of Human Life Sunday that just passed in January.
Yeah, that's another amazing part of your story. So I'm very glad that you shared that because I've heard it at different shows that we've seen. And so I'm very glad that that was able to be shared here as well. So thank you for doing that. So as I mentioned in the opening, you performed with so many fantastic artists. I love getting to see you with the Gaither Vocal Band a few years back when they stopped in Buffalo. That was so cool.
Yeah.
And I know you've been a part of the Gaither Family Fest for quite a few years, and you'll be heading back at the end of May to Gatlinburg, Tennessee for this year's on Memorial Day weekend. Can you share a couple of your favorite memories, either with the vocal band or these other fellow artists that you've met through these events?
Oh my goodness. So this lady, when my mom came to know the Lord, she introduced us to Gaither videos. And so that was like in 2001. And so here we are, 2023, and I'm having the opportunity to sing with them. And the first time I stood on the stage with them was 2017 with the vocal band. But prior to that, from 2001 forward, I used to attend these different festivals and things that they did, these different gatherings. So I had been attending for 15 years. And by this time, I'm building an album repertoire. I start singing, I start writing songs, and I start making my move in my mind. I'm a chiropractor at this point. I'm a full-time chiropractor. But in my mind, I know at some time I'm going to become a full-time, singer and speaker and author. And so my patients don't know this yet, but I know this, God knows this. And so all through these 15 years, I'm going to Gaither events and I'm meeting these folks and I'm getting to know them. And they first got to know me as a chiropractor. So one of the concerts in, I think it was Rochester, New York, a husband and wife couple that everybody loves so dearly on the Gaither stage there. I went and introduced myself because at these Gaither concerts, you can go to the tables and meet them and say hello. And I always said, hey, I'm Doc Sherry, because I wanted them to remember my name. So I said, just call me Doc Sherry. And so they're like, hey, Doc, what are you a doctor in? And I said, well, I'm a chiropractor. Chiropractors, we love chiropractors. So after this one concert, this couple grabbed me. I was sitting in the front row and they took me backstage and they said, I've got this problem, I've got that problem. And of course, I'm licensed in the state of New York. So instantly the backstage area turned into an office. And I set up like a table and chairs and a little consultation. And I began to have this line that was piling up out the door of these people. And I had a blazer on and I threw the blazer on the ground so that people wouldn't get dirty. And, just had this little assembly line of the crew and the backstage crew. And Mr. Gaither walked by and he was like, oh, you're a chiropractor? Yes, I'm a chiropractor. And eventually it got to the point where I would bring my table and actually set up a room backstage and he would come by and everybody would come by and it just become an incredible time of getting to know them and them getting to know me. And so when I still hadn't recorded an album, but when I made my first album, I went to Gaither Studios. And that was such a beautiful memory and time. They remembered me, Mr. Gaither remembered me, and he and Gloria picked me up after one of the recording sessions and took me for a ride through the town. And Bill and Gloria I told them they remind me of like my grandma and grandpa. My grandma died when I was young. I still have my grandpa, but they are just everybody's grandma and grandpa. And they certainly are the grandma and grandfather of gospel music. And they took me through their town and they showed me, I remember Bill said, oh, here's the post office. And I just thought that was the cutest thing. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing. Like, here's the post office. You know what I mean? Like, Bill wanted to point out the historical value of the post office, and then the grocery store, and then the cemetery where his family was buried. And the town, everybody knows him. They call him Billy or Bill or something, everybody knows him. And he goes in and gets his mail and, and I was like, this is what you would hope Christians would be. This is what you would hope that the family of God would be. And my family was so disjointed when I was a kid that it was just so great to be adopted, if you will, into this family of gospel music. And that's kind of what happened. And that set the trajectory for the next so many years. I started my first CD there. And every CD after, I worked with somebody in the Gaither family. And so including my last project with Toni Jolene Clay. She's been on a number of videos with the Gaithers. And she and her husband produced a lot of work for George Johnson, the cathedral. So it's just been an incredible ride, if you will, starting with that first car ride in Little Indiana with Bill and Gloria Gaither. And I get to go back to Family Fest again this year, which is every Memorial Day weekend. If anybody's interested in going, they sell out just about every year. So definitely want to look into tickets for that. And their website, gaither.com, my website, sherryann.com, will drive you to their website. So I hope to see you there or anywhere else that I'm going to be, because now I travel all across the country singing and speaking and sharing.
That's so cool. I had not heard that story before. So I love that you shared that. I feel like that's another example of God just like coming in and showing like using like your original path as a doctor. He used that to in turn guide you towards music and where you are today. And that's just amazing. I love that. And also what you said about feeling like, being adopted into the family. I have started to feel that too with a lot of the different creatives that I've been able to interact with and, talk with like this or in person. It is so wonderful when God can use people in that way. And like you said, that's the way Christians should be welcoming, should be feeling like you're an extended family, because that's what we are in him. So yeah. I think that's just so beautiful. So you mentioned that you have done some writing and you are an accomplished author with a couple of children's books that have been released. How Are Ya? And Wyatt is a Riot. So what inspired you to initially begin writing these stories?
I always loved children's books, and I mentioned I love writing poetry. I do love writing, and I've been working on a devotional forever. It's almost in the home stages. I just need to find it all up and put it all together. But I love writing and expressing. And I don't have any children of my own, but I have a lot of nieces and nephews that I adore. And two of them in particular are near and dear to my heart because they lost their mom to cancer when they were 6 and 7. And she had battled cancer for several years, 3 or 4 years prior to that. So they kind of only saw their mom sick and only knew their mom sick. And then she passed away when Arya was 6 and Wyatt was 7. And I had already had in mind to write children's books. I love them. I read them. I keep them. I have a few. And I had saved some for kids that I thought I was going to have someday that I didn't have. But now I have this collection for them. But I wanted them to have their own children's book. So her name is Arya. His name is Wyatt. And I know that children's books, I wanted it to be like an educational experience. So I wanted it to rhyme and teach them meter and rhythm and rhyme. And that's part of the musical background of me as well. So it's how Arya, and quiet, Wyatt is a riot. And Arya loves animals, loves nature. She's like her dad in that way, probably her mom too. But she absolutely adores animals. At this point, she's thinking about being a zoologist or a vet. And so her book is loaded with animals that she goes out for a walk one day and she meets all these animals on the way. And each animal says, how are you, Arya? And they tell her who they are and what they do. And it all rhymes and it's very cute. And Wyatt loves his family. He's very close to his family and his cat. Like his whole world is his cat. So Quiet Wyatt is a riot. Wyatt gets into all this adventure with his cat. And the cat helps him. He's like his little accomplice in all these things. And so it's really cute. And they go kind of like, they cause a little havoc and mischief throughout the town. And we finally get Wyatt quiet at the end. So it's really cute. And then I do a CD because I'm hearing impaired. I'm very sensitive to the fact that some children may be visually challenged or impaired, and maybe they can't see these beautiful pictures that were hand drawn by a beautiful illustrator named Chris Strange. And he made these amazing pictures, but not every child can see that. And I realized that. So I made a kids CD that had the stories narrated by me with sound effects. So they can fully enter into what's happening on the page because they can hear it. And that comes free when you get the CD. The CD comes free when you get the book.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know that they are available at your shows in person, and they can also be purchased through your website online, sherryann.com.
Yeah.
And so you alluded to the fact that you have a devotional in the works. What other projects do you have coming up that you're excited about?
So definitely this devotional is a long time in the making. I just need to I wrote several of these devotions over the last few years. I need to get that out. I'm hoping for this year, Lord willing. His time, we've learned by now, we've seen by now, it's all in his perfect timing. But that devotional book, and then I do want to do a worship album. I know that you do a lot with worship music, and I love worship music. I always have. So I'm hoping to write more, do more songs that I've written, and get a worship album out there. It might be a worship / hymns album. Not really sure how I'm going to approach that, but I'm praying about that direction. I did do a live DVD. I did a concert that people can watch if you're a person that likes to stream. We have that available. People have asked if I'll do another one. I'm not sure about that, if I'll do another whole live video. That, by God's grace, tried it on Billboard. We had a great run with that. But I know that DVDs are not as popular at this time, but that concert is now available for streaming. So definitely more books in the works and some musical projects, just not sure the direction. I'm doing more women's conferences and singles conferences. So I would love to get a singles handbook out there. And I also would like to get some books out there about the songs that I've written. So for instance, Still the God Who Parts the Sea, you mentioned that. It's about how God is still delivering you through the troubled waters of your life. And I would love to put a book together, maybe of stories of people who have been, what they've been delivered through and what they've come through and what God has done for him. So basically like a story of God's faithfulness. And I'd love to do certain themed books based on songs that I've written. For instance, I've written a song, I Only Know to Pray. And I'd love to put together a book of people where God has answered their prayers. So I'm thinking about doing certain thematic books with a theme, as God wills, as time allows.
That's awesome. And I definitely will look forward to reading whatever you are led to write, because that's a really special gift as well, to be able to do that and share in that way. So yeah, we definitely want to encourage everyone to visit sherryann.com, check out your tour schedule and the store so they can check out all the stuff that's available there, because you have a lot, which is awesome. And also your YouTube channel, because you've been doing a series of like really inspiring videos there as well, in addition to your music videos. So and they can connect with that through your website and find you on social media as well.
Yes, I do. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And I also got on TikTok, and I do devotions on TikTok. So we have like a nice little devotion segment that I do there. But all of these things are free. So it's a wonderful way to connect and to be encouraged. And I hope to be inspired and to be encouraged and uplifted in your faith. Because of what he's done for me, I am so grateful to be able to share that with other people. And I thank you for allowing me to share that today.
I am so glad that this worked out to have you on the show today. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. God bless you and your mom.